Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Adlam with Youth Pledge for Employers, and I'm delighted to be joined by Jennifer Cushion this afternoon, who's the Managing Director at Fern Communications. Hello, Jennifer.
Hi there, Chris. How are you?
Yes, I'm not too bad. Thank you for finding the time to be with me this afternoon. As I say, as a Managing Director, I can imagine you're a pretty busy person. I guess my starter for 10 question has to be, please tell us about Fern Communications and what you do.
So Fern Communications is a tech company, and we specialise in the energy sector. We started off as a radio communications technical company, but now we've branched into all areas relating to technology in the offshore world. From, you can see in my background, there's offshore renewables, that's the wind sector. There's also oil and gas, nuclear, and then coming into hydrogen as well. So all things to do with technology and the energy sector.
That's brilliant. It's really interesting, and again, it's one of those areas that I wouldn't even know there was a company that do what you do, if you see what I mean, unless I spoke to you and learned about your existence. And I'm guessing within, as you say, as a sort of tech company, I'm guessing you've got all kinds of employees, all kinds of roles and backgrounds. I'm assuming sort of maybe some technical, some others. Can you just sort of give us a sort of bit of a breakdown of the kind of people that sort of make up your company?
Okay, so if I started with myself and my husband, who also runs the company, I'm an electronics engineer. So I've been working in radio communications electronics for many, many years. My husband is a product designer. So it's also known as an industrial designer. So the sorts of work he would do would be design what products look like. We also have IT engineers, radio technicians, and we've just employed two apprentice project managers. So they are two women that have just finished their A levels. They're going to East Coast College once a week to do their apprenticeship course. One's working in our operations department and the other one's working in our engineering department. So they have their own field, but they're adding to that the skills of project management.
Oh, that's absolutely amazing, and it's really interesting to say to sort of see how your background sort of fit the organisation, and sort of this leads me quite nicely on to my next question. To say, if I look at those sort of two, say, apprentices you've just brought on, what kind of sort of skills and traits and characteristics are you sort of looking for, and what kind of traits and characteristics do you think you sort of need to be successful in sort of within your company?
I think what we like is, shall I say nerds? Is that okay to say?
It's a word. It's fine by me.
So we're a technical company, but we all like sci-fi. We like technology, and that can be something that men and women can enjoy. So we look for women to join the industry very much so, because we need to have a balance in all industries there, especially in technology. But yeah, I think that's the sort of thing. But when it comes to other aspects, things like attention to detail, good English and math skills. But I think people have those sorts of skills and they don't really often realise it. So we encourage that type of thing.
No, that's brilliant. And it sounds like you put an emphasis on, as I say, those sort of core personal skills. You say the skills that maybe people aren't aware that they have in great abundance. I'm assuming in your line of work, obviously, you need to have a good degree of technical know-how as well. When it comes to, as I say, the products you're working with. But how would you feel that split goes in terms of the technical know-how in regards to, as I say, the sort of maybe more qualitative traits that people need?
Well, I think an interesting technology then helps you to learn. So we have mentors here. We have people that have worked in the industry for a very long time who then are mentoring the younger people who work with us. So the two apprentices we have at the moment aren't our first apprentices, but we do like working with apprentices, and we do like to be able to share the skills that some of us, the older ones here, have been able to accumulate.
That's amazing, and I say that that whole philosophy of sharing experience, I think, is so beneficial, and it's only going to serve those particular apprentices really well going forward. Going back to more sort of like a day-to-day of Fern communications. I mean, as I say, this is not my area, so by all means, please tell me, like, what kind of products are you sort of working with? What kind of clients are you working with? If you see what I mean, feel free to give me an example of maybe sort of the kind of things you send to where, if you see what I mean.
Okay, so just an example of a big project that we've been working on for the last, I would say probably for the last 6 months, if you include all the planning stages, is what we call wave radar.
Okay.
So if you think an offshore wind farm is a long way offshore, and if you're sending small boats out there to transfer technicians onto the wind turbines, you need to know what the weather conditions are out there. And most importantly, you need to know what the wave height is, because if the waves are too high, then it's too dangerous for the technicians to transfer from the CTVs, the small transfer vessels, onto the turbines. So there's all sorts of weather predictions and weather monitoring, but there's nothing like actually knowing what's going on offshore. So what we've been doing is we've been installing these pieces of equipment called wave radar. So they measure the height of the waves and the direction. And we've been installing them on turbines on a particular wind farm in the north of Scotland, and then getting that data using our radio equipment back to the marine controllers on shore so they can actually see what the height of the waves are offshore.
It's brilliant. As I say, I feel like a bit silly because I'm a bit like I didn't even know this technology existed, let alone, as I say, you utilizing it, as I say, in a project. As I say, it's one of those things that, again, until you explain it to me and stuff, I'm a bit like, I didn't even know that existed or what that would be used for. So that's absolutely brilliant.
So just to say also, this the types of skills to get a project like that together. So we've had to write all sorts of software. So you need software skills. We've got to write the user interface. So that is to enable the marine controllers to actually read that information. So it's like a web page, as well as technicians who have the skills and the training to go offshore and run cables and install this equipment. So there's a variety of different skills that we have within the company that people use for this type of a project.
I mean, you've almost taken my next question completely away from me. As I say, you've sort of spoken about, as I say, the array of roles and the different skills required, and I guess sort of leading on from that, this is probably the most difficult question I know for an employer to ask when I start talking about a typical day, because I'm aware that there aren't typical days in many industries. But if you had to summarise, and I might ask you to do this for your new apprentices and then maybe for yourself as well, just to give sort of a nice balance of maybe someone who's starting their career journey and maybe you who, as to say, sort of progress for your career journey. What is sort of, say, a typical day like for yourself and maybe for one of your new apprentices?
So a typical day for myself would be lots of Teams meetings, lots of discussions with the team here, but also talking to customers and potential customers. So for myself, there's a lot of talking and managing meetings and managing people. But for the apprentices, which is probably more interesting, a typical day for one of our apprentices, and that's the one that's working in the engineering team, would be to install some radio equipment on a boat. So on the wind farms, you have lots of boats coming and going depending on the work that's required at the time. And each time the boat comes on or the vessel comes on, it needs a new piece of radio equipment. And that's used then to be able to privately talk within the network and within the wind farm. So she would go with one of the more senior engineers to the vessel that could be in Lowestoft Harbour or Great Yarmouth Harbour or even down at Harwich, and they would install the antenna, they would run some cables, and then they'd put the radio onto the bridge for the captain or the skipper to use. So that's working on a vessel, but that particular type of work wouldn't be offshore, it would be in the harbour.
I mean, that's quite possibly one of the most sort of exciting typical days I think I've ever come across.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And you touched a little bit on this earlier, but please correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm assuming you didn't wake up one day and you thought, you know what, I'd like to become the managing director of a tech company. So can you just take us through a little bit about sort of your career journey and how you sort of ended up where you are?
Well, you can probably tell from my voice that I'm not from the UK. I'm from Australia. And I was always interested in technology. So I'm one of those nerds that I mentioned before. Always liked science fiction writing. And so when I left school, I did a uh, technician's course and got a trainee or went on a traineeship with the Australian Civil Aviation Authority, which then taught me all sorts of different areas of technology. I came to the UK on a holiday and then got a very good job with a radio communications manufacturer and just decided to stay, which was great. But then when I got married and started a family, I decided probably the best way to manage the work-life balance was to run my own business, and then I would be my own boss, and I could choose when I wanted to work and when I wanted to maybe visit my children at school on sports day, etc. So yeah, that's the way it went. But I kept on the career path of communications and radio communications and technology.
I love that approach to it. Just I don't think a company will have the right hours for me. I'll make my own and I will find hours that work for myself. I
Mm.
think that's absolutely brilliant. You've sort of mentioned it almost with tongue in cheek, and say about the whole sort of like ideas of maybe being a nerd or whatever to work in communications. And if there's any young person watching this, they might feel that stereotype sort of leads into maybe they're not having the strongest communication skills or maybe not being particularly outgoing. So you yourself, as I say, you need to have, you're having lots of meetings with people, having lots of frequent communication. If someone's watching this and they feel that they've got the tech interest, what advice would you sort of give to maybe how they could develop develop the skills required to maybe to be able to communicate with people effectively, in a role such as yours?
Um, well, I think technology has its own communications and its own language. So if they're being able to or having to communicate with other engineers and other technicians, then I think there is a language all of its own there. So we don't necessarily need to be the most articulate people, but it's the jargon that we learn and the technology that we learn. And I think that's something across the field for technical type people. We have people here that are dyslexic, and we find that the dyslexic people that we employ, and I would count myself as one of those, is that we tend to think outside the box quite a lot. So, we have different ways of looking at things and viewing things, and that's all part of that technical creativity that companies like ours appreciate and nurture.
No, it's brilliant, and it's really good to know that actually that's, I say, that sort of creative problem solving ability is something that you're looking for. And I think that's very much, you touched on this earlier, one of those traits that maybe people might not realise they actually have. If you see what I mean, as I say, they might think that if they're having ideas to something that are maybe a little bit out of the box, they might think, oh, why am I thinking about doing it that way? That's very, very silly. Well, actually, as you say, there are lots of organisations that are looking for that skill set.
Yeah, yeah, we appreciate that type of thinking very much so.
That's brilliant. And just to round off, really, and every employer I've met with, I've asked this question too. And it's really that if you could go back, Jennifer, and you could speak to, say, 17, 18-year-old Jennifer, just starting out on your sort of career journey, based on all the experiences you've had now, what piece of career advice would you give to your younger self?
Um, probably, I think, don't think that whatever you do when you leave school is going to be the only thing you do. Everything that you learn, everything that you do enables you to go onto that new path or that new step. And even if things at the time feel like, oh, that didn't go quite well, it probably then will put you in another direction. So everything's moving and changing. So don't feel, oh, you have to know exactly what you want to do, and that's going to be it for the rest of your life.
I think that's a really solid piece of advice, and I'm guessing that's actually really reflective in the industry you work in, because I'm guessing the tech is always evolving. There's always a new way of doing something, and as you say, if you don't have that ability to sort of roll with all those changes and learn from them and embrace them, then you struggle. So that must be something that you sort of practice on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, yes, no, technology evolves, people evolve, and you just have to roll with it, and that's fine.
Brilliant. Thank you again, Jennifer. I think that's a lovely note to end on, and thank you for spending time with me this afternoon.
Thank you, Chris.